Welcome to my channel. My name is Bill Callahan. My channel is Fretboard Refugee, where I kind of document my progress as a new guitar player. I'm about 7 months into my journey. I'm going to try to make this a weekly feature. I'm probably going to record it during the weekend and try to release it by Monday. That might change with time. But purpose and goals here are to try to give out on YouTube what I have found and valued on YouTube. That is first and foremost inspiration, watching somebody's learning process, watching somebody become a better guitarist, watching somebody share the things that have worked and not worked for them. I really value what I found in terms of educational content, both specific exercises, things for learning, practice routines, but also more meta stuff about how learning works, stuff about what doesn't work, what might be holding you back. Really value that kind of content. I also really value the recommendations for like gear and equipment that people have like put out there, because they're generally honest and critical if things don't work for them, and glowing in their praise if things really do work for them and open up new worlds of playing. So that's kind of what I want to create here, and I kind of just want to do this to hold myself accountable as well with what I've worked on all week, what I've achieved, what I haven't achieved, that sort of thing. So in terms of the format of this, we're going to go through a few different recurring categories week to week. Songs of the week, I'm going to go over what I've been playing, what I've been working on. I may or may not share performances of those things with you. But this week I've been working on Hotel California, which was the song last week for Tony's Acoustic Challenge. It's a pretty simple chord progression, but I've also been working with some, arpeggios and solos in the appropriate scale to try to really learn the song on every level. Also started looking at a song Crosscut Saw, which is a blues standard that's kind of in a rumba format. Now, I'll give you a brief look at what that consists of. We're basically talking about a slidey shuffle riff that has like a dancey rhythm to it. So for our one chord, that riff would kind of look like this. You'd be on the low E string, you'd hit 3, 5, then you'd slide up to 7, then you'd do 5, 7, slide back down to 5 on the A string. So that would be one measure. So let's see if I can get into the rhythm of it here. Might not be able to on demand, we'll see. Got to work on that slide back down from 5 to 7, but a lot of the songs from that era are kind of in that rumba format. They have that boom, 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 boom kind of groove to them. So that and Hotel California are the songs I've been working on. Just a little bit of what I've been doing with Hotel California. There's like this sort of version of the chord progression you can do on the top 3 strings here, and you can kind of arpeggiate. Just kind of so you can use the the arpeggios pretty freely to get the same feel of that chord progression, if you can play them fast enough, which I can't yet. But a full performance of that song might look like just strumming the chord progression for the verses, for the chorus, but for the intro, maybe for where the solo would be, you can focus on those arpeggios, or you can even just hit bass notes of the chords and sort of, solo around, work on riffs, work on just slides or simple triads over the course of the solo. I learned this in the key of A minor in practice. It is performed in B minor on the record, so, this would actually be and you can get there with a capo or by using different voicings of the chords. So that's what I've been working on song-wise. Themes for the week. For me, it's been both, picking and fretting accuracy, because getting to some of those unfamiliar chord positions, hitting the right strings, has not been easy. So I've been spending some quality time with a metronome, just trying to get that kind of thing, like in time, and the transition from that to, the next little chordlet of the couplet, so to speak. That's been a challenge, but that's something I've been working on. We're hoping to see some progress on that soon. Also, rhythm. A lot of my soloing work, it's tricky to figure out where in the chord progression you want to throw in your solo. Like if you're doing a blues in A and you want to do, this kind of thing here, this. See if I can get it right. You want that to match the rhythm of the song. You want that to come in, at a specific point in the 12 bar where it makes sense. So you might have, you might want to think of the bars in pairs. So there is a bar where you might want to do a call lick. So then you might want to do a response lick a bar later. You can go back and forth with those. You can do variants of those as well. And then you can have a different call and response in different places. So over the course of a 12 bar, you can have 3 different calls, 3 different responses, or 3 of the same calls, 3 different responses, or you can switch it up. You can also do, more elaborate things that don't necessarily fit the call and response if you're doing more than one trip through the 12 bar, and you can answer them later. So if you want it to be, a little higher and throw in a bend and be like. That's all within that A minor world. So that could be something you solo on in, a rock song, a blues song, whatever. Especially if you're in the pentatonic, it goes over a multitude of things. Educational principle. Every week I want to highlight something that has worked for me in the different ways it has worked for me in terms of learning. So for this week, I guess the principle I want to focus on is context. Because context matters when you're learning a song. And there's different kinds of contexts that are important. I shared on this channel before about the fingerstyle blues piece I was learning and how difficult it was for me to conceptualize what was going on with my fingers until I actually looked in the song in terms of the format. 12 bar blues, when you first learn it, you're usually talking about like a chordal format where you might be strumming E7 on the first 4 bars, go to A7, then back to E7, and then you'd come around to the 5 chord, you'd hit a B7. Well, that Slow as Lightning piece, there's one passage where you're kind of doesn't really feel like like a chord, but you are actually using the shape of a particular voicing of E7 when you're down here on the 3rd and 4th fret of these two strings. If you know that shape and you get stuck in the song and that bar comes around, you can just sort of, you can maintain the time of the song and you can play that chord. Also, if you know what the chord is supposed to be, whether you're playing the chord or not, your fingers gravitate towards where the chord goes. Like let's say we're working on like an A7. Well, this is a pretty common voicing of A7 in fingerstyle blues. You've got the first, or the highest 4 strings of the 2nd fret bar, and you've got that high E string fretted on the 3rd fret, and that's an A7. You're not necessarily going to play that. For instance, in the piece I'm working on, you play this. Doesn't necessarily sound like an A7 if you're a beginner, if you haven't thought that through, but if you know that's where your fingers are supposed to be, well, guess what? Most of the fretting is already there. You don't have to change that much. And if you just put your fingers there and sort of figure out the fretting pattern, it's a much shorter learning curve. So that's sort of a chordal context for riffs, things like that, but melody, harmony, lead lines, chord backup, these are also contexts. So if you're learning to strum a song, let's say you're learning to strum some simple singer-songwriter thing. Heck, let's say you're learning to strum Hotel California. Knowing what key you're in makes a big difference because then you can start figuring out the melody within the scales of that key. You know what your chord progression is going to be. You don't need to look up, oh, do I go to E7 next or what? Because you know what the chords are that are fair game in that key. You know that, your 1, your 4, your 5, your 6 are going to be the most common chords in that key. You can start figuring things out on the fly. Or if you don't have tabs in front of you and you want to practice, you can kind of guess and you'll be able to tell, hey, does that sound right? Another part of getting the context when you're learning a song is listening to the song. Humming along with the melody, humming along with the chords. Once you know the chord progression and you're driving to work later, call out the chords as they're strummed. That gets it in your head. That gets the overall structure and context of the song in your head. So when you're looking for a specific string, you're looking for a specific voicing, you've already got all these associations built. Context doesn't really stop at the music theory level either. An important part of context is history, especially in music. The way, the time, the place, the experience of the man writing the song, playing the song matters. The experience of the man playing the song matters even if he didn't write the song. If you wanted to learn Jimi Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower, yeah, you could pick up tabs, you could do that, but if you've also played Bob Dylan's version of All Along the Watchtower, a much more choral, strummy, acoustic song, it begins to make sense why Hendrix might have made some of the choices he did. That goes both ways too. If you're listening to like a cool indie acoustic cover of a song that you grew up with as like a rock ballad, I mean, understanding that those power chords are the same things as the bar chord voicings you might see in that song, that makes a difference. Seeking out different versions and performances of the song will teach you things about what is essential to that song and what makes it that song. For instance, Layla, one of the greatest rock songs of all time, was played originally electrically, Derek and the Dominoes under Eric Clapton. The rhythm is very much driven by kind of power chords on the top 2 and 3 strings. But if you listen to Eric Clapton's iconic unplugged performance of that song, you see very different voicings. You see a lot of individual strings struck by the same guitarist between chords, and you don't see so many power chords, but you see a lot of this sort of thing, a bar chord, where you're going to be strumming and making those small changes in the fingers to get between 2 bar chords, which it turns out look a lot like the 2 power chords that normally go there. And if you're primarily an acoustic player, guess what? The power chords are going to make more sense to you after you figure out that version. So context can mean a lot of things. It can mean historical context, it can mean genre, it can mean understanding, well, this kind of came out of the blues tradition. Does it look like a 12 bar? If you break down like a Chuck Berry rock song, forget about the rhythm and look at what chords are happening when, you're pretty much looking at a blues song that is being played, usually in straight eights instead of in a triplet feel. If you understand what the 12 bar blues is, you can figure out a Chuck Berry chord progression pretty easily. These things are valuable to know. These things are valuable for the understanding of music in general. If you want to understand what rock is, where it comes from, you have to understand blues. If you want to understand a specific rock star version of a song, or a specific rock star's approach to a genre, it's valuable to understand the history of that genre, who his influences were, what influences he's embracing, what influences he's rejecting, what's the one big thing he's changing that makes him different, that might make others not have gone there. These are things that will open up levels and levels of understanding. I strongly encourage you to ask these questions. So that's the educational principle of the week. Context matters. That's context in terms of history, context in terms of artistic influence, context in terms of different versions of the same song, what makes them the same, what makes them different. And context in terms of the technical details of what key we're in and why. Is there a chord maybe that doesn't usually go in that key? Why did they make that choice? If it's a song in the key of G and they use a version of, I don't know, let's say the B chord that is not normally in that key, well, what are they getting out of that? B is the third in the G major scale, so what happens with a third? Well, we know a lot of the tension in blues and rock and adjacent genres comes from either a flat or unflattened third, the tension between a flat third and an unflat third. So if you're using a diminished third chord, maybe you're trying to get some of that vibe. If you're using a minor third chord where you normally use a major third chord, maybe they're trying to play with that idea of that flat third in blues. That's a possibility. Couple other things that I want to start doing every week in addition to this show. I really enjoy figuring out alternate tunings, playing around in them. So I'm going to try to do a Tuning Tuesday where every week we will pick an alternate tuning. This week it is going to be Open G because I've been working in Open G for a couple of weeks for a previous song. We're going to break down, Open D. We're going to break down how Open D works, what it's good for, what it's not good for, what possibilities it opens up on the fretboard, what possibilities, if any, does it foreclose on the fretboard, what kind of play does it lend itself to, what kind of play doesn't it lend itself to, what's the history and context of the tuning. That's going to be something I try to sit down and do tomorrow, and we're going to go through different tunings with that. We're going to talk about Open G one week and why that's favored by slide players, and we're going to talk about Drop D and why that's different and how that's different. We can talk about things like general down tuning. I have one guitar over there that is currently tuned in standard tuning down half a step, so I guess you would call that E flat standard. And the reason I did that is because there's a song I enjoy playing and singing, but I can't quite reach the high notes. That one half step lets me sing it much more credibly, and it still sounds like the song. So that is something that I think is valuable. You can often use a capo to sort of transpose a song, or just change the chord progression to transpose a song somewhere where it's easier to sing, but sometimes an alternate tuning can accomplish the same thing. Or it can add a different flavor to a song you already know, or it can make a song easier to play, or easier to play in a certain way, or easier to play with a slide that you might already know in a different tuning. So that's going to be our Tuesday plan. Our Thursday plan is going to be Theory Thursday, and that's going to be highlighting some kind of musical theory topic. At first, we're probably just going to talk about keys and what the chords are in the keys and what the scale looks like in the key. this week, I'm going to be working, because we're already doing an open D tuning Tuesday, we're going to go ahead and do a key of D theory Thursday. So we're just going to talk about what the basic chords are in the key of D. We're going to talk about the relative minor. That would be B minor. We're going to talk about, what scales might be fair game in a song in the key of D. D major scale, obviously. B minor scale, possibly. B minor pentatonic, definitely. D major pentatonic, definitely. Look at possible ways of connecting those things, or when you'd want to use one and not the other. And we're going to look at, how that key fits on the guitar in general. We know as guitarists we have a special advantage over, say, like if you're a saxophone player, you can't play in certain keys. You're going to be very comfortable in B flat, you're going to be uncomfortable in other keys. Guitarists, we have kind of an advantage because we have movable scale shapes. If I have an A minor pentatonic, well, that same thing on the 12th fret is your E minor pentatonic. If you're playing the piano, those black keys aren't going to be in the same place when you need to get to a minor, flat or a sharp. You have to learn different shapes for different scales. If you're playing a horn, you might not even be able to play in that key at all. In a guitar, you can play in every key. But let's be honest, if you're playing in a key like B flat, you don't have any open strings you can use. You don't have a lot of the resources that you have available to you in the people's key of G, or a key like E or A or D. So there are easy keys and there are hard keys for a guitarist under most circumstances. But because we are the instrument that is most likely to play with other instruments, we have to learn to play in those keys. We have to learn where to move our hands on the fretboard to access the same things, and we have to learn how to reach things like F-sharp chords, with bar chords, with power chords, with other variants on our normal open chord shapes. These things are good to know. A couple other things I wanted to do are highlight an instrument and a piece of gear that I've been using. So let me grab another guitar. I'll be right back. So this is an Ovation Celebrity. Make sure we're in tune here. We're getting there. 2 strings to go. Last string. There we go. Okay. So Ovation was one of the first brands to perfect this little devil, the preamp. So what we have here is a guitar that is designed to be amplified as a native ability. Not as some kind of special ability, not as something you have to add a component to after the fact. I am not going to play amplified in this particular video because I'm using my acoustic amp to hold up my iPad and record this, which is probably poor planning on my part. But this guitar I found for a very low price on Facebook Marketplace. A guy who had too many guitars, who loved it but didn't get to play it as much as he wanted, so he was going to get rid of it. And I was a beneficiary of that. About 25 years ago, when I was living in Syracuse, New York, I had started learning guitar. I had this borrowed nylon string classical guitar, and one day I was at Carousel Mall in Syracuse, New York. It had this, it's like a 3-story mall. It's got a convention center. It's one of the biggest malls in America, or was, back in 1999, the golden age of the mall. And the basement of Carousel Mall had this huge music store full of guitars. And I was in there with my girlfriend at the time and my good friend Jake, who was the best guitarist I knew, taught me a lot of things. He was really into what I'm now into, which I didn't appreciate at the time, fingerstyle blues, acoustic blues, that sort of thing. His dream was like a resonator guitar, like a steel guitar with the resonator plate that you play with the slide. And he picked one of those up in that guitar store and was just playing this incredible blues thing with a slide. My eye was caught by one of these round back Ovation guitars. At the time I was in engineering school. That didn't end up working out, but my plan was to be a mechanical engineer. And I appreciated this as a novel solution to an age-old problem. The guy who designed these worked in the aerospace industry. I believe he designed helicopters. He liked guitar, he dabbled in guitar, and he decided there was some way he could use modern materials to make a cheaper, more sustainable, less temperamental instrument. So this has a solid wood top, like most quality guitars. It has a pretty unconventional looking but functional headstock, normal neck, and it has this composite back made of a material that's called Lyricord. It's a proprietary plastic. People have mixed feelings about Ovation guitars. It's kind of a love it or hate it thing. Part of the problem is this is slippery. So you put this on your thigh, if you're not playing with a strap, it's going to end up doing this. So that's just a matter of having a tight strap and kind of nestling it in the right place in your thigh muscle. But for a plastic guitar, and people don't like it when you say plastic when they're talking about things like this. It's like firearms guys, you have to say polymer. You can't say it's a plastic gun. This. This composite guitar sounds beautiful. The preamp was decades ahead of its time. This is pretty standard now on acoustic electric guitars, but these came out in the 1970s. And touring musicians loved these because you didn't have to go through the elaborate ritual of putting mics a certain distance from your guitar and not moving too much. You didn't have to bolt on an aftermarket pickup or go to a professional tech to have a pickup installed in your guitar. This came with an onboard pickup and an onboard preamp that even gives you some EQ. This also has an onboard tuner. You see that I tuned from the preamp. This particular one, Ovation's model numbers are kind of a sea of confusion. It's very hard to figure out what you have, what you don't have if you're looking at the used market. Things are regularly discontinued and brought back. But this is something in the celebrity line, which means a new street price anywhere between $450 and $700. I don't know how old it is. I don't know what year it is. I know I got it for 120 bucks, which was a hell of a deal. It's in excellent condition. There is a slight warp in the wood right under the sound hole here. Because this back material is so durable, the way that Ovations fail if they're not taken care of is usually too much heat, humidity, cycles of getting wet and drying out. That repetitive process will warp the wood at a different rate than it'll warp the plastic, and eventually you'll get cracking. So I've been taking good care of this. There was no cracking, and hopefully there will never be any cracking, because I love this guitar. The action is nice and low. It lends itself very well to playing individual lead line notes, especially with a pick. So playing my scales on this feels almost as easy as playing my scales on an electric. You can play fingerstyle on this as well, but I think the nut's a little narrower, and the lowness of the action actually makes it harder to get between strings if you're trying to do elaborate things like whatever you call those, where you kind of flick the string. If you're trying to get little arpeggios where your fingers don't get in the way, that can be a little more difficult than on a guitar that's just a little higher in the action. But I love this guitar for strumming. I love this guitar for learning an acoustic song, playing an acoustic song. I love how easy it is to plug in. And it was kind of my dream guitar when I first picked up a guitar 25 years ago. And spotting it on Facebook Marketplace that one day and being like, oh, I can still get my dream guitar, that was a really cool moment. One other weekly thing I want to do is feature a piece of gear or accessory or two that has helped me on my guitar journey. So, the accessory of the week is a very simple plectrum. This is a D'Addario Acrolux 1.5 millimeter. So this is a very thick acrylic pick. It does not make a lot of string noise. I don't know how well you can see this, but we are beveled down to a nice fine point, but with a controlled curve. So there's not a moment where this flicks off the string and makes a noise. This is a very smooth way to pick individual strings. It's also a very smooth way to strum, and it forces you to relax because this has almost no give. This is not like some of the very cheap thin picks that beginners usually gravitate towards. In fact, I bought these originally to pick my mandolin because that requires kind of rounded, very firm pick. At least the way I play it. I'll talk more about mandolin playing later, because that's something that's been a theme this week as well. Maybe I'll feature that as my instrument next weekend. But my featured gear, the D'Addario Acrolux 1.5 millimeter pick, and I like the rounder ends. I have some thicker picks that are kind of designed in the same way that are a little pointier, and you get a little more of a flick off a given string when you use those, which at this particular time and place in my guitar journey is not conducive to me hitting clean, smooth notes. It leads me to more of a staccato bump, bump, bump than the bum that I'm going for. One more thing I want to do every week is do a shout out to another person creating content out there that's been valuable to me. I've mentioned several times that my main source of guitar learning right now, day to day, is the Tony's Acoustic Challenge program. This is a subscription-based, web-based learning tool that 5 times a week, usually there's a featured song every week, and there's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday routine. Monday, you're doing a technical exercise. This week, we're working on hammer-ons. Hammer-ons with different fingers at different parts of the fretboard. Tuesday there will be a guitar lick. Usually it will feature whatever the technical task is from Monday. So it will be a guitar lick that is heavily based on hammer-ons this week. Wednesday there's an improvisation challenge, which usually consists of learning a scale in a position or two in a given key. This week it's going to be D major scale, I'm pretty sure. And then improvising over a chord progression in that scale, seeing what you can come up with, what licks you create. At first you just play that scale in time over the backing track, and then you try to come up with licks of your own that work with that backing track. Thursday is the actual chord progression of whatever song we're working on this week, and he hasn't announced a specific song this week. Some weeks are like that. It's more of a technical challenge and a common progression that comes up in a lot of songs. Friday is a chord transition challenge. This is where you do things like, well, probably this week it's going to be hammering on as a way of hitting a chord or a way of embellishing a chord. So probably it's going to be whatever the one chord is, and then, hammering on to the four chord in a way that affects the rhythm of the song in a certain way. Tony's Acoustic Challenge is excellent. It's a great learning resource, regardless of your level, I think. But Tony Polcastro, the guy behind that, also has a YouTube show called Acoustic Tuesday. Now, when I first discovered guitar content on YouTube, Acoustic Tuesday was my favorite thing. Like, no matter what tuning I was working on, whatever genre I was working on, there was an old Acoustic Tuesday episode about that. And I was very disappointed to discover he had stopped making that show about 2 years ago. I still had a huge back catalog to go through, and as I was coming up on the end of that back catalog and already a member of Tony's Acoustic Challenge, he announced he was starting it back up again. So I think we're 5 episodes into the new season, so to speak, of Acoustic Tuesday. It's been excellent. It's been great to have it back. And it has kind of inspired what I want to do with my channel on a much smaller level, because every week there is learning content. There's some specific skill, which is often but not always adjacent to whatever's being worked on in Tony's Acoustic Challenge. There's a acoustic news list, like things that are in the news that are relevant to things like an artist he's partial to releasing an album, things like a new line of guitars or gear from a company he likes. Usually there'll be a featured guitar. He obviously has the resources to pursue fancier guitars than I do for now. And there'll be a trivia question. It's just a great way to just check in and stay motivated every week. And I really appreciate having that show on the internet, and that's kind of sort of what I want to do here for new guitar players. But I want to do it from the perspective of somebody who's starting at the bottom, learning from scratch. I think I can still provide some valuable advice and content to people who are learning like me. And I think it's a general truth of learning and teaching that teaching is one of the best ways to learn. So that's something I hope to get out of this channel, is the opportunity to share what I'm learning in such a way that I firm up my own knowledge, that I know it better, and that maybe I can pass it on. So thank you for listening to the first weekly roundup here on Fretboard Refugee. Tomorrow I am going to record and hopefully put up my first alternate tuning Tuesday. So I look forward to seeing you here. Thank you very much.